I'm Tom Bennett, 65, from Denver, Colorado. For 39 years, I opened my hardware store before dawn, the town waking to the sound of my key in the roll-up door and the coffee machine gurgling in the back. When I sold the place last spring, my hands still woke at 5, as if they hadn't received the retirement memo. Retirement is a funny word. People picture fireworks and hammocks, but mostly it's a quiet hallway with doors you aren't sure how to open. Some lead to freedom, others lead to fear. That's why I planned the trip. My son Luke is 35, a high-flying software guy who lives on conference calls and airport coffee. We used to fish the Platte River when he was 10. Back then he looked at me like I'd invented water. Lately he looked at me like I was buffering. I told him, bucket list, kid. The Amazon. You and me. No emails. No meetings. Just miles of green, and the old man showing you he still got legs. He hesitated, then smiled. Let's do it, Dad. The Amazon greeted us like a giant breathing world, its river muscling past with quiet authority. From the boat we saw pink dolphins and endless sky. Luke filmed everything, laughing like he was 10 again. For a while, the space between us closed, and I thought maybe retirement's hallway had finally opened to a door marked freedom. Our lodge perched on tall stilts over the water. Solar panels winked on its roof, and a chalkboard announced tomorrow's hike to a legendary kapok tree. The manager, Ines, welcomed us with both hands. Drink more water than you think. Don't go out alone. Respect the jungle. She is generous when you are humble. Luke nodded like a negotiator pricing humility. We slept under nets while the night throbbed with insects and secrets. At dawn, the air felt like warm tea. A local guide, Mateo, led us through trails where every footprint told a story. Luke charmed everyone, carrying my pack and making jokes in half-learned Spanish. One evening he asked if I'd ever consider moving somewhere with more community. I laughed it off, thinking Denver had plenty, even if it was frozen half the year. The next morning we reached the ancient kapok tree, a living cathedral. Mateo placed my hand on its bark and said it was 2 centuries old. I thought about my own grandchildren, 2 states away, and about how money and time are 2 currencies that don't exchange well. Luke kept glancing at his phone even though it had no signal, a habit that hinted at unfinished business. Later, at a riverside market, he wandered off with Ines for a quiet talk. They returned with smiles that didn't quite meet their eyes. Back at the lodge, he handed me a revised schedule highlighting a community visit for the following day. Surprise, he said. Thought you'd love to meet them. I agreed, though something in his careful cheer planted a question I couldn't name. That night I woke to footsteps on the boardwalk and low voices that paused when I shifted in bed. I told myself it was nothing, just guests or staff, but the unease lingered. At sunrise Luke was already dressed in his best shirt, duffel bag neatly zipped. He greeted me with a too bright smile. Big day, he said. Ready? Always. I answered, because a father is always ready for his son. We set out for the riverside village, a cluster of stilt houses alive with children's laughter and the smell of wood smoke. The people welcomed us warmly, showing how they cared for elders and kept everyone engaged in daily work. Luke asked quiet, probing questions about how seniors lived there, how they stayed active and connected. His jaw tightened like he was fitting pieces into a puzzle. By dusk we were back at the lodge. Over herbal tea, he grew strangely formal, as if rehearsing something. The night cracked with rain. I half-slept until I heard him moving again before dawn. When I finally stepped onto the deck, Luke's duffel was slung over his shoulder. He looked out at the water, then turned with eyes both soft and certain. Dad, he said gently, I talked to Ines and the village elders. This place is perfect for you. You light up here. You belong here. Dad, this is your new family now. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the width of the boardwalk. Say that again. I managed. You heard me. This is better. For your health, your mind. The tribe keeps you active, not isolated. I'll visit more, I promise. I stared at him. The jungle suddenly loud around us. Do I have a say? Of course, he said. Always. But I have to catch the supply boat back to the city. I'm not abandoning you. I'm placing you. There's a difference. He hugged me, firm and final, then walked away as if this were the most loving thing a son could do. I raised my hand when he turned for a last look, because even in shock, a father answers. The boat carried him out of sight. I sat with a cup of coffee that tasted like a question and watched the ripples where his boat had been. A young woman from the village, Alana, approached and tied a simple woven bracelet around my wrist. For finding what you've lost, she said with a quiet smile. I looked at the green threads and felt the pulse of the river beneath my feet. Luke believed he was saving me. I believed the story wasn't over. I stood, stretched, and asked Ines to show me the day's chores. If this was where I had been left, then this is where I would begin. Morning in the Amazon arrives like a drum roll of light. I woke before the village rooster and stepped outside. The wooden boards cool under my bare feet. The bracelet Alana had tied the night before lay snug on my wrist, its green and brown strands catching tiny beads of dew. I flexed my fingers and let the stillness settle. Luke was gone. No coffee shared, no map folded on the table, no easy smile waiting for me. Only the broad, breathing jungle remained. I thought of the thousands of small rituals we'd built over the years, Saturday breakfasts, hardware store inventories, weekend fishing trips, and how suddenly they had collapsed into a single, uninvited silence. But silence, I realized, can be an opening. It can either break you or teach you to listen. Ines met me on the deck with 2 tin mugs. We start early, she said. The jungle likes doers. Her steady voice anchored me. I followed her down to the canoes, where a boy named Rafa was already coiling nets. He grinned shyly and handed me a paddle. Today, he said, you learn to fish like us. We glided over dark water that smelled of rain-soaked leaves. Rafa showed me how to lower a basket trap and read the faint tremor that meant a fish had wandered in. My arms trembled with the unfamiliar work, but the rhythm came quickly, and with it a small surge of pride. When we pulled in the first catch, a flash of silver fighting the net, Rafa cheered as if I'd scored a winning goal. For the first time since Luke's departure, my laugh came from the chest, not just the throat. Back at the lodge, Ines taught me how to clean the fish with the care of someone carving memories into a meal. We cooked them over an open flame, and their scent filled the morning with quiet triumph. After breakfast, Alana invited me on a forest walk to gather medicinal plants. She spoke of each leaf as if it carried a biography. This one cools fevers. This one mends wounds. This one teaches patience. You boil it slowly, or it punishes the taste. I listened, absorbing not just the uses, but the gentle reverence in her voice. When we reached a clearing, she stopped. You know, she said, sometimes our children think they are giving us freedom when they are only giving us distance. Both feel the same at first. The word slid into me like a key into a lock I hadn't known was there. I thanked her, but she only smiled and led me back to camp. Days began to form their own rhythm. At dawn I fished or helped repair nets. Midday brought lessons in cooking, weaving, or the simple art of conversation where no one looked at a phone. Evenings ended with stories told in a circle, some in Spanish, some in gestures, all stitched together with laughter. Each task tightened something inside me that had loosened over years of business rush and city habits. My body grew stronger, my mind steadier. The ache of betrayal softened into a kind of hard clarity. Yet I never forgot that I had not chosen this exile. I began to think carefully about what came next, not with bitterness, but with the resolve of someone drawing a blueprint. One afternoon, while helping Mateo repair a section of the boardwalk, I asked if there was a way to send a message upriver. He nodded. Supply boats pass every few days. We can arrange a ride to the nearest town with a phone connection. I thanked him but didn't commit. The timing had to be mine. That night, under a ceiling of sharp stars, I opened a new mental ledger. On one side, I listed what I was gaining: health, patience, a deeper kind of company. On the other, I listed what needed protection: the savings from my store, the house back in Denver, the legacy I hoped to pass on. I would not let confusion or anger write withdrawals against those assets. By the end of the first week, the village no longer treated me like a guest. I was simply Tom, a neighbor with chores and jokes of his own. I helped fix a leaking roof, learned to paddle in swift current, and even played in a nighttime soccer match where lightning bugs lit the sidelines. One evening, Eduardo, the elder with the handshake like a promise, joined me on a bench overlooking the river. "I hear your son left you," he said matter-of-factly. I nodded. He believes I belong here. Eduardo chewed the thought like sugarcane. Belonging is not a gift someone gives. It is a verb. You belong where you decide to stay, after you know all the doors are open. His words stayed with me like a lantern in a dark hallway. A few days later, I borrowed the lodge's small notebook and began writing letters, one to Luke, one to my daughter back home, and one to myself. In Luke's letter, I poured out gratitude for the adventure and the pain he had unknowingly sparked. I told him I forgave him, but did not absolve him. In my daughter's letter, I outlined the practical steps I wanted taken if I did not return soon. Check the house, secure the trust documents, keep family stories alive for the grandkids. In my letter to myself, I wrote 3 vows: never confuse love with control, never let comfort replace purpose, and never sign away the right to choose where I live. As the second week began, I sensed it was time to move. Not away from the lessons, but toward a resolution. I spoke to Ines. "I'm grateful," I said, "but I need to reach a phone." She nodded, no questions. "A supply boat leaves tomorrow. I'll arrange it." That night the community held a farewell meal. Children danced. Eduardo blessed me in his soft river Spanish. Alana pressed a second bracelet into my palm, darker green, threaded with tiny wooden beads. "For strength," she said. The next morning I stepped into the boat, with a heart that felt both full and sharpened. The river carried me toward the nearest town with cell service, toward airplanes and cities, and the sun, who thought he had arranged my golden years. On the long ride back I planned carefully. First, call my daughter to reassure her and explain the basics. Second, meet with my financial advisor to lock down the trust and ensure that no one, not even well-meaning family, could access funds without mutual agreement. Third, arrange a family meeting where I could speak with calm authority, not anger. I knew that confronting Luke in rage would only deepen the gap. What I wanted was understanding and change, not punishment. Still, I would not let sentiment blur the boundaries I had rediscovered in the jungle. As the jungle thinned and the first outline of a town appeared, I felt a deep quiet settle inside me. What began as betrayal had become a long, fierce conversation with my own life. I had been tested by distance, silence, and the raw power of nature, and found stronger ground than I had ever known. I thought back to the early days of retirement, when I described the future as a hallway of unopened doors. I realized now that the Amazon had not only opened a door, it had given me the courage to build a room beyond it. With the village fading into memory and a new horizon opening ahead, I knew the next step was no longer about survival. It was about return, and about teaching my family that love means presence with boundaries, generosity with wisdom, and finances guarded as carefully as the heart. 2 flights and 1 long layover later, Denver's dry air greeted me like an old friend with a new handshake. The crisp autumn smell of pine and distant snow filled my lungs. I tightened the green and brown bracelet on my wrist, the Amazon's quiet strength riding with me as I stepped into the familiar terminal. I didn't call ahead. Instead, I let myself into my own house just after dawn. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for the feeling. The place no longer hummed with stored-up silence. It waited. The first call I made was to my daughter, Claire. She answered on the second ring, worry and relief braided in her voice. "Dad, where have you been? Luke said you extended your trip." "I did. I said calmly. But on my terms. I'm safe, and I'll tell you everything soon. For now, I need you to come by tonight. There's a family meeting we all need to have. By afternoon, I'd reordered my finances like a craftsman laying a solid foundation. I met with Martin, my longtime financial advisor, a man with more sense than flash. We drafted a living trust with crystal-clear guardrails. No unilateral access. All major decisions to be made jointly, with both my children present. We added clauses for education funds for the grandkids and a yearly budget for family trips. These weren't just numbers on paper. They were promises shaped into law. That evening, as the sunset spilled copper across the Rockies, Claire arrived first, hugging me as if to anchor herself. Luke came last, cautious, his eyes searching for signals he could interpret. I invited them to sit in the living room, where every family Christmas had begun. On the coffee table lay a pot of coffee, a plate of cinnamon rolls, and the green bracelet, now dry but still bright. I began with gratitude. I told them about the Amazon, the mornings of fishing, the nights of starlit conversation, the villagers who had shown me a deeper way to live. Then I turned to Luke. You need to know what your decision did, I said gently. You left me without warning in a remote jungle. You called it placement. I call it abandonment. Both words live in the same neighborhood. Luke's face tightened, then cracked. Dad, I thought I was helping. You were so alive there. I was scared you'd come home and fade into a chair like Grandpa did. I wanted you to keep moving, to feel needed. I understand the fear, I said, but fear is not an excuse to take someone's choice. You can invite me to live differently. You cannot decide for me. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the slow ticking of the wall clock, steady as a heart. Finally Luke lowered his head. You're right. I was wrong. I see that now. His voice broke. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I reached across and took his hand. I forgive you. And I thank you. Because what you meant for help without permission turned into a lesson I needed. I found strength I didn't know I had. But there must be changes. I slid the freshly signed trust across the table. This is our new financial plan. Nothing leaves these accounts without both of you agreeing with me. It protects our legacy and gives us money for shared experiences, not just stuff. Claire read the document and nodded, eyes bright. Luke studied it like a man reading his own turning point. Then he exhaled. It's perfect. This is what I should have helped you do in the first place. The conversation turned warmer. We spoke of annual family reunions, of scholarships for the grandkids, of creating a Bennett family journal to capture stories before they slipped away. Later, Luke followed me to the porch. The night was crisp, a million stars drawing their slow lines overhead. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and humility. Dad, I was afraid of losing you. I see now that I almost lost you by holding on too tight. I put a hand on his shoulder. Love isn't control, son. It's presence and respect. Promise me we'll remember that, both of us. I promise, he said, and I believed him. In the days that followed, our family wove the new plan into action. We booked a summer reunion in the Rockies. Claire set up a digital family vault for photos and letters. Luke, on his own initiative, wrote an open letter to his siblings and cousins, describing what had happened, taking full responsibility for his choices, and sharing the lessons he had learned. I also began speaking at local men's groups and retirement seminars, telling my story not as an adventure tale, but as a blueprint for safeguarding one's golden years. I spoke about financial clarity, emotional resilience, and the courage to build relationships on invitation rather than obligation. Fathers and grandfathers came up afterward with wet eyes and firm handshakes, grateful for a roadmap that felt both practical and soulful. One Sunday, while hiking a familiar trail near Red Rocks, Luke said quietly, I still see that village when I close my eyes. The way they cared for each other. Maybe what I really wanted was to bring some of that spirit home. I smiled. Then let's do that together, right here, with our family. We began hosting monthly community nights, inviting neighbors, old friends, and even newcomers for shared meals and open conversations. It wasn't the Amazon, but the same deep connection thrived in the laughter and stories that filled our Colorado evenings. Months passed, and with each gathering I felt the jungle's calm heartbeat alive in our living room. I wore Alana's bracelet every day, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder. Freedom isn't found by running from family or by holding them too tightly. It's found in honest presence and well-guarded choices. One evening, during a reunion filled with grandkids chasing fireflies, Luke raised his glass. "To Dad," he said, "for showing us that the best way to secure our future is to live our values today." Everyone cheered, and I felt something I hadn't felt even in the Amazon, a wholeness that included every chapter of my life, from early mornings at the hardware store to humid jungle nights to this porch where family laughter outshone the stars. Looking back, I realized Luke's misguided plan had become the very spark for a stronger, wiser family. What began as betrayal had ripened into understanding. What began as fear ended in freedom. So here is the lesson I now share with every father and grandfather who listens. Guard your golden years not by building walls, but by setting clear boundaries and open invitations. Protect your finances with the same love you protect your heart. Invest in memories, not possessions. And never let anyone, no matter how close, decide the shape of your life without your voice in the decision. My journey began with my own son saying, "Dad, this is your new family now." Today I can finally answer him, "Yes, it is. And we are building it together, on ground we all chose." The jungle taught me to breathe. My children taught me to forgive. And life itself taught me that even betrayal can be the doorway to the most lasting kind of unity. The months after our family meeting passed with a new rhythm, as if time itself had agreed to the rules we set that night. I woke each morning with purpose, sometimes to hike with neighbors, sometimes to cook breakfast for grandkids who now dropped by on school mornings, just to surprise me. The house, once quiet enough to hear a clock hesitate, filled with cheerful interruptions. Luke and I began a weekly ritual of long walks through Denver's old neighborhoods. We talked about everything: the Amazon, work, his own questions about purpose. No more hidden agendas, just steady conversation between two men who had finally learned that love is clearest when it isn't trying to fix anyone. One Saturday he said, "Dad, I've been thinking about the trust. It isn't only paperwork, is it? It's like a family compass." I nodded. Money is just fuel. The trust is a map. It tells us where we're going and keeps us from burning out on the way. Claire joined us on many of these walks, and sometimes the grandkids skipped ahead, shouting about squirrels and secret forts. Each outing felt like another stitch in a fabric we were weaving together, stronger for the very tear that had once threatened to rip it apart. We decided to expand our community nights into something bigger: the Golden Years Circle, a monthly open house for neighbors, friends, and anyone curious about living well after retirement. We didn't preach. We shared meals and real stories of wins, mistakes, and lessons that outlasted paychecks. Word spread quickly. Couples showed up holding hands. Widows arrived with old photo albums. Young parents came hoping to learn how to build the future without losing each other along the way. I spoke often, not as an expert, but as a fellow traveler who had once been left in a rainforest and found something better than anger. At one gathering, a silver-haired man named Robert told me, "I was planning to downsize quietly and let my kids figure out the details later. After hearing you, I'm calling a family meeting this week. I want to choose, not leave a puzzle behind." His eyes glistened as he thanked me. I felt the Amazon in that moment, the way a single choice can echo like a bird call through a whole forest of lives. Meanwhile, Luke found his own way to give back. He started a digital platform to help families document stories and financial plans side by side. "Too many people leave money and memories in different drawers," he said. "I want to put them in the same book." He credited me publicly as the inspiration, which humbled me more than I expected. Our family trust, once just ink on paper, became a living practice. Each quarter we reviewed it together, not out of suspicion, but to celebrate what it represented: vacations planned, scholarships funded, and even small gifts to neighbors in need. Money no longer sat in silence. It moved like a healthy river, guided but never dammed. As winter turned to spring, we fulfilled a long-standing dream, hosting a reunion in the mountains. More than 30 relatives gathered under the wide Colorado sky. We fished the cold streams, told stories by the fire, and cooked meals that tasted of both tradition and new beginnings. One evening, after the grandkids had finally gone to sleep, Luke stood and raised a toast. "To Dad," he said, "for showing us that forgiveness isn't weakness, and that strength is measured in steady love, not stubborn pride, and for proving that it's never too late to start a new kind of family." Applause warmed the chilly mountain air. I looked around the circle, children, cousins, neighbors who had become kin, and felt a satisfaction deeper than success. This was wealth. To see laughter ripple through generations, because we had chosen connection over control. Privately, Luke and I still spoke about that day in the Amazon. He never tried to justify it again. Instead, he asked questions. "When you realized I'd left, what did you feel first, fear or anger?" "Neither," I said after a pause. "I felt the weight of choice. Yours and mine. I knew I couldn't change what you'd done, but I could decide how the story would end." He nodded slowly. "I think about that every day. It keeps me honest, with you, with everyone." In early summer, I returned briefly to the Amazon, this time by choice and with a plan. Luke insisted on coming. We were welcomed like family. Alana and Rafa ran to greet us, bracelets of fresh colors in their hands. We stayed 2 weeks, working alongside the villagers, sharing news of our golden years circle back home. When it was time to leave, the farewell was full of music and laughter, not surprise. This time every door was open, and every step was mutual. Back in Denver, I reflected on how far we had come. Retirement no longer felt like a hallway of closed doors. It was an open courtyard with many gates, each leading to a different kind of abundance. I began writing a book, part memoir, part guide, called Family by Choice and Chance. In it I described how betrayal can become a bridge, how financial clarity strengthens emotional bonds, and how fathers and grandfathers can shape legacies that outlive markets and headlines. Publishers have since shown interest, but I care less about sales than about the letters I receive from men who say, "Your story gave me the courage to talk to my kids." One autumn evening, as Luke and I grilled vegetables on the porch, he said, "Dad, when I left you in the Amazon, I thought I was helping you stay alive. But what I really did was wake us both up. You to your own strength, me to the meaning of respect." I placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes life uses our mistakes as chisels. The shape it makes is better than anything we planned. We stood in companionable silence, the sky deepening to a velvet blue. From the living room came the sound of Claire reading a bedtime story to the grandkids. The smell of roasted peppers mingled with the memory of rain-soaked jungle wood. I realized then that the Amazon had never truly let me go. It had followed me home, not as geography, but as wisdom. As I finish telling this story, I offer one more lesson to every father, grandfather, and family listening. Secure your golden years with care. Protect your finances with clear agreements. But above all, cultivate love that respects freedom. Do not wait for a crisis to speak your heart or to gather your people. The best time to build unity is now. I began this journey when my own son said, "Dad, this is your new family now," believing he was closing a door on my old life. Today I can answer him with gratitude and calm conviction. Yes. And together, we made that new family real, here by choice, with every door wide open. The river of our lives will keep moving, but we steer it with every honest conversation, every boundary set in love, every shared meal that says we belong because we choose to. That is the wealth no market can crash, and the inheritance every heart can leave behind.